Hello and welcome to the Social Sciences Department at Heybridge High School and Sixth Form. My name is Samantha Body and I am the Head of Social Sciences here at Heybridge. So I just wanted to spend the first minute or two just going through sort of our passion and our ethos as the Social Sciences Department. So as a department, the subjects comprise of psychology and sociology. And we're passionate about ensuring those subjects not only obviously teach you the content that you need to succeed in exams, but also to broaden your knowledge of wider life. So we try to understand behaviour, be that on an individual level or on a societal level if you're talking about sociology. But we also want to develop the skills that you need to be a successful sixth form student as well, be that in reference to essay writing skills, time management and organisation skills as well. We again want to make sure that you're benefiting beyond the expansion of the academic skills that you will develop by also then using the knowledge you cover in lessons to understand what shapes behaviours that you see in everyday life. So you're not just sitting your exams and getting your qualification, you're then broadening your knowledge of human behaviour and why we behave the way that we do. We take a knowledge engage approach to the delivery of our subjects. So obviously there's content that we have to cover on the curriculum and we do that across the 2 years. But we also believe strongly in delivering information that help you develop the skills that you need to succeed in your examinations. And we feel as though you're in the best capable hands within our department to do that, because we are experienced examiners for the AQA exam board, and handily they are the exam boards that we use for psychology and sociology. So we share with you the hints and the tips that are needed to jump through those hoops and succeed in the examination, and we sort of pride ourselves on embedding that within our lessons so that you have both the knowledge and the skills to be able to achieve what you would like to achieve in those examinations. So I've already introduced myself briefly, but I just wanted to go through the structure of the department, who are essentially going to be your teachers within social sciences. So as I've mentioned, my name is Samantha Body. I am the head of social sciences and I'm a teacher of psychology. So I am, as I said, an experienced examiner with the AQA as well. So I will ensure that I embed all of that skill and that knowledge that you need to succeed in your examinations. We then have Tracy Forward, who you may have heard from already if you've watched the sociology slideshow. She is our teacher of sociology within the department, again a very experienced examiner for sociology, who again takes that knowledge-based approach, but also embedding those skills to succeed in your examination. And then lastly we have Katie Bannister. She is another teacher of psychology, but also the head of media studies, so you may have seen her already. Again, very experienced sixth form teacher. So we think you're in the best capable hands with the staff that we have in this department. Now, because we can't do this presentation in the classrooms, just wanted to share with you some of the displays that we have in the classroom and some of the resources that we use, just so you can get an idea of the environment that you'll be learning in. So as you can see there's a picture of, well, I say a picture of a model of the brain. Obviously within psychology, when I talk a bit more about what that course entails, the brain is kind of our epicenter for our behaviour according to the biological approach in psychology. So it's important we get an understanding of the brain structure, how it works, how certain parts may work together to get a certain task done or to behave in a certain way. So we have lots of practical application to the biological approach. There's also a picture on the right hand side of this screen here. You can see that there's a wider reading board, So obviously we have the content, but that point I was raising at the start here, we really encourage some wider reading for those that are particularly interested in the subject, maybe thinking of taking it further, just as an extension really of your knowledge. And they are little QR codes that you can scan with your phone, and that takes you to a virtual library where you can start to read around some of the topics that we cover, so not just the research that we cover within the curriculum, but getting that broader knowledge from that wider reading. We also have certain extension activities as well, so if you ever finish a task early, you can just look to your left in the classroom and you can have a go at some of those extension tasks just to get you consolidating what we've covered during the lesson. We've also got a display board that you can see there. That's some students' work from my Year 13 group last year. We look at research quite a lot within psychology. We have to evidence things with empirical scientific evidence. So we have a go at conducting our own research and we critically analyse that in our lessons. So on the display we've got the actual route that researchers have to take, and we try to replicate that. So within this study, for instance, with my Year 13 students, we were looking at the effect of sleep and how that might affect memory and recall. So students went and did their own research using academic bases such as Google Scholar to find what evidence is out there already to inform their predictions, to make hypotheses, and then they tested that with a sample of participants, another psychology group, and looked to see if there was evidence to support that initial theory. Okay, so some more images from the department on here. So we've got a display board of command words, and they are words that we will come across frequently throughout our 2 years, and they've again come from my knowledge of working with the exam board, so that if we ever get a question in the lesson that I ask you to have a go at, you can have a look at the command words board, and that will tell you what information it is exactly that you will need to include. So for instance, if we have to discuss perhaps an approach within psychology, we'd need to outline it and then evaluate it, so critically analyse strengths and limitations of that approach. So it's a good visual cue for students to get to grips with what's being asked of them within the exam. We also have a timeline because we're arguably looking at how psychology has emerged over the years throughout the topics that we cover. So it wasn't necessarily deemed as scientific many years ago, and many of the researchers that we look at have sort of fought to get its scientific status as it's recognised today. So we look to see who's contributed to that and the development of psychology as a science really. And then also on the left hand side of this screen you can see that there's some textbooks and some student magazines. I'll talk more about the student magazines a little bit later on in the PowerPoint when we talk about the extracurricular activities that we offer. But for now we obviously guide our knowledge and our curriculum based on recognised materials. So we'll obviously try to do as much practical application with that knowledge as possible, and there's some quite nice application activities that we can have a go at replicating research within those textbooks. And likewise the student magazines, the Psychology Review it's called, is something that you as students can sign up to again broaden your knowledge within the field of psychology, but I'll touch more on that a bit later on in the PowerPoint. So what can you expect in your psychology lessons? Well, firstly, I think it's important that we discuss what the aim of psychology is. So psychology is the scientific study of the human mind. So we try to understand the human mind by looking at scientific evidence in theory. So to sum it up, we try to study what causes certain behaviours by looking at the different approaches within psychology and the research that's being conducted into those theories, because unlike your standard sciences like biology, chemistry and physics, there are multiple different ways of explaining behaviour within psychology, and it's about looking at how all of these holistically may explain behaviours. So some of the typical things that we do during our lessons is we replicate the studies that have been conducted many years ago to see whether there is still evidence to support those today. We also discuss in class about that evidence, again critically analysing them, strengths and limitations, any reason why we might have to draw conclusions from that research with caution by looking at, again, limitations. And as I've said already, you'll get lots of practical application tasks and practical exam preparation with the specialist knowledge shared from myself, having marked for the AQA, and we have a go at lots of past exam questions. We have a go at assessing them ourselves. We peer assess, and likewise I obviously have working to give you feedback on there as well. So on the next slide, I aim to talk about exactly what the course content entails, but some of the questions that we try to answer within psychology that students find particularly interesting are listed on here. So what causes mental illness? We also try to answer, are we all actually a little bit mentally ill? If we consider mental health is on a spectrum, we're all on that spectrum somewhere, it's just how far onto that spectrum we have got and whether that constitutes a diagnosis of a disorder. How can we deal with stress? Obviously very topical when we come to sit exams. Again, students like that because they can use what they know about dealing with stress from the content we cover and apply that to dealing with that during exam season. Why did Hitler's troops kill so many people? So when we look at social influence, we look at obedience, what causes people to blindly obey authority when in theory we could be causing harm to somebody. Do neglected children ever recover? So we look at the effects of children who have failed to form an attachment during childhood and the effect that has on their later relationships, their school life, etc. Why do we follow the crowd? Why do we conform if we know that we're conforming to something that isn't quite right? We look at whether daycare is good or bad for children when we look at the attachment unit. We also look at how accurate our memory is, so in reference to particularly eyewitness testimony when we are witnesses to a crime. How accurate is that memory and how easily led are we when we're asked, let's say, a particular type of leading question. And also how can we improve our memory? Again, a very topical question because when it comes to you revising, you may learn something from the memory unit that helps you improve your memory and improve your scores in not just your psychology tests but also any examinations that you might have in your other courses as well. So as well as answering those questions, we fit that into the actual course content, the curriculum that you cover within psychology. So the first thing that we look at is the approaches, the different approaches to explaining behaviour within psychology. So the biological approach, which is the influence of genes and neurochemistry on behaviour. The cognitive approach, which is the influence of your thoughts and how thoughts control behaviour. We also look at the behaviourist approach, which is the idea behaviour is learned through association or consequences such as reinforcement. We also look at the psychodynamic approach, which is Freud's theory. You may have heard of Freud before, who believes the unconscious mind is what controls behaviour. So we look at those approaches first, and that feeds into some of the units later on, the more specialised behaviours that we can use those approaches to explain. We also look at biopsychology as a unit in its own right. So obviously we look at the biological approach, which briefly touches on what the key principles are there, but biopsychology then looks at biological structures and neurochemistry in a bit more detail. So again, brain structure, what structure of the brain influences certain behaviours. Likewise, things like the fight or flight response, where we have that sudden rush of adrenaline and that causes us to stay and fight the stressor or to run away from it. So we look at just the influence of biology there for biopsychology. We then look at a unit that's called psychopathology, which is the mental illness unit. So we look at disorders, in particular we look at depression, OCD and phobias, and we look at what the characteristics are to be able to diagnose somebody with that. We look at the cause of those mental illnesses and the most effective way to treat them. We then cover schizophrenia, which is again obviously a mental illness, but we look at that in more depth because it's such a complex and misunderstood disorder. We look at again, how do we diagnose it, what are the issues with diagnosing it in reference to the reliability, the validity of diagnosis, and then we look at again the many different approaches to explain the causes, and then the treatments that might be used to manage the symptoms of schizophrenia. We also do a research methods unit, and this is a double unit because it's worth double the amount of marks in comparison to all of the other units mentioned so far. So again, that's how to conduct research within psychology, the process involved with that, the methods we could use, evaluating which method might be better than another, and that can come up in any of the topics that we look at. So it's not just a section of its own right in the exam paper 2, which I'll touch on again in a bit more detail later on. It can come up anywhere because research underpins all of the content within psychology. We also look at social influence, which is really about social behaviour, so conformity and obedience. Why do we follow the crowd, and why do we blindly obey orders from a position of authority? We also look at the memory unit. Again, I've touched on this briefly from the previous slide, but the different models of memory, how memory works, factors that might affect the accuracy of it, how can we then improve it, and then we also look at eyewitness testimony, the factors that affect that, and again the use of the cognitive interview that could be used to improve the accuracy. We also look at attachment, so how children form attachments, why they form them, and what happens if they don't form them. We also look at forensic psychology, so how we profile offenders, how we build up a picture of somebody, again explanations for criminal behaviour, and looking at the most effective way of treating criminal behaviour to ensure that they don't go on to reoffend again in the future. We then also look at cognition and development, which is how children develop thought and intellect, and again the different approaches and different way that children do that. And then lastly we look at issues and debates in psychology. So that's the key issues that we discuss throughout the 2 years, but then put into a unit, which is the nature versus nurture debate. So does our biology, nature, have more of an overpower on behaviour than nurture, which is your environment, or is it maybe best to look at a combination of the two? We look at sort of free will versus determinism. Do we have the ability to choose our behaviour, or is it predetermined by some of the approaches that we cover? So they are the topics we cover across the 2 years, and again a bit later on in the PowerPoint I'll talk to you about how they're split across the 3 exam papers that you'll be doing. So some of the extracurricular opportunities that you are able to access within the social sciences department are listed on this slide. So again, I've touched on this already, but you have the opportunity to sign up for the Psychology Review, which is a student magazine, and that's at a discounted price. And that allows you to keep up to date with recent research and literature within the topics that we cover during our lessons. So we encourage students to sign up for this if you know that you have any interest already in going to university to study psychology, or another course that would link to behaviour and understanding behaviour, let's say, because that can be something that you add on to your personal statement, let's say at university, to say that you are signed up to that student magazine and you're keeping up to date with all of the current literature that's out there within the field. We also run a number of trips within the department during Personal Challenge Week at the end of the year, and that's again to widen your knowledge of the course content. So some of the things that we are doing at the moment and there's many others that we potentially are able to do. One of our firm favourites with students is a trip to Worcester Crown Court. We sit in the gallery to watch the trial proceedings, and that applies to both psychology and sociology, because we cover forensic psychology within psychology, and then we also cover crime and deviance within sociology. So it's again something that's really useful for students, because this may not be anything you've ever experienced before, and you can see exactly how a case is built up for an offender and what method they've chosen to deal with their behaviour. We also run a trip to Twycross Zoo because they do a lovely talk on evolutionary psychology, some of Charles Darwin's theories, and how we have evolved as humans from our cavemen and cavewomen as ancestors. And we also have at the moment an external speaker who is a trained cognitive interviewer for the police force, and they provide us with a practical workshop on successful interview techniques. Again, that feeds into both psychology and sociology, for the points similar to the trip when we go to the court, because we cover forensic psychology and the cognitive interview within memory, and likewise sociology, the crime and deviance unit. So many people ask me, what could I do with my psychology A level? And really the opportunities are endless. It is a recognised and respected A level that many university subjects, apprenticeships would recognise and appreciate students as having taken as an A level. So there's many different routes you can go down, and I've just put a few examples on here, but I have popped a link at the end of this slide as well that you could go and do some more research on here. But what we've seen typically students do in the past that go on to study psychology is maybe specialise in one of the areas that we study at A level. So for instance, in the past, some students have gone to study clinical psychology at university, and then work with people with mental health issues, and the aim of that is to try and improve their quality of life. And you can also go into counselling through that as well. Others may choose to specialise in, let's say, forensic psychology, because they know they want to work alongside maybe the police force in building up a picture of a crime and a picture of an offender. So they can go on to work in profiling of offenders and maybe treatment for their behaviour. You could also specialise in occupational psychology, which feeds into maybe the business fields. So you can work with those businesses to understand the way that employees work and create incentives and initiatives alongside the managers of those companies to make sure that your employees are working as effectively as possible. But you can also go into many other job roles with psychology under your belt as well. So you can go into marketing, you can go into the police, coaching, accountancy, and many more, because psychology studies human behaviour, and ultimately whatever job you go into, you're going to be working with humans or investigating humans or dealing with humans. So really this is a great A level to have for any field. But if you would like any more information, there is a link from the British Psychological Society's website there under their career opportunities. So the structure of the course then, what will you be covering and when will you be covering it? So we have 3 exams at the end of year 13. There is no coursework within psychology. We do front load the course, so by the time you finish year 12 you will have covered 2/3 of the course. And the reason why we do that is because it allows us then in year 13 to go back through everything that we did cover in year 12, as well as covering that final third of the course content. Now that we've moved to the new A-level system where you are assessed just at the end of year 13, the temptation sometimes is to leave your revision right till that last minute, but by front loading the course we're able to support you with your revision and your review in year 13 by doing that for the first 2/3 we covered in year 12. It also means that if there is any reason at all, and I hope this wouldn't be the case, but if there was any reason why a student decided they wanted to leave us at the end of year 12, then we've covered all of the material that's required for students to sit the AS exam, and they could get an AS level rather than an A level if they've decided to leave us for whatever reason. So the way that the exams run, as I've mentioned, there's 3 exams. They're all 2 hours in length. They're all worth 96 marks in total, and each one is worth 33.3% of your final A level. So paper 1 is when you cover social influence, memory, attachment and psychopathology, so 4 units on there. Paper 2 is approaches in psychology, biopsychology and research methods. And there's only 3 topics on there, and that's because research methods is a double unit and that's worth 48 marks rather than 24 for the other single units. So again, 2 hour exam, 96 mark in total. And then paper 3 is the options in psychology paper, again a 2 hour exam, and we cover paper 3 content in year 13, and that's the final third left to cover. And as I've mentioned, paper 1 and paper 2 will then be reviewed in year 13. So is A-level psychology the right choice for you? So we are a very popular subject every year. And most people find psychology incredibly interesting, myself included, even after teaching it for however long and studying it for however long. It still fascinates me today, but the course is demanding. There is a lot of content that we have to cover, and this will be a new subject for the majority of students. So when weighing up whether you think this is a course that you want to take, I've just put on here just some questions that you may want to ask yourself to see if you are suited for this A level. So you do need to have good writing skills. So obviously we're a written based exam, and we will be doing essays throughout the 2 years, and the maximum marked question you can get in the exam is worth 16 marks, and that's our essay style question. You also need to be able to retain a lot of information, and you need to do that through your own regular review. Obviously you have homework set, but as an A-level student it's not enough just to do the homework. You need to then use independent study time to review and check your own understanding as well. You also need to be organised and self-motivated. So we as a department work very hard. We tailor our lessons, we use all of our knowledge as examiners to design the most effective lessons for you, and we expect you to match that in your own time as well through your own independent study. And likewise, if you want to study a respected and academic subject, then A-level psychology sounds like it could be the right choice for you. So just spend some time weighing up, you know, those points and thinking, am I somebody that likes exams, or am I someone that prefers coursework? And obviously because we don't do coursework in psychology, you need to be able to, you know, sit those 3 exams and retain all of that information through being motivated enough to review it throughout the 2 years, and not just leaving it until the month before your exams. So that just leaves me with one final message, and that's just to say thank you very much for taking the time to consider psychology here at Heybridge High School and Sixth Form. We are a department who are very passionate about our subjects, and I'm really passionate about psychology, and there's nothing better for us really as teachers than to share our passion and make students equally as passionate about the subject that you'll be studying as well. So we really hope to see you in the near future, and feel free to contact us via email or to visit the links on that final slide there. My email is sbody, which is BODDY at heybridge.works.sch.uk, and I'm available to answer any additional questions that you may have about the course.